Today I'm going to remake this bus I made 4 years ago. Hopefully this means in 4 years I have improved. If you haven't seen it already, I did the same thing in a previous video, remaking an old ambulance model from around the same time. And that's in a previous video if you want to go look on the channel. So the main issue with the bus, just like the ambulance, is the fact that there's no reference used. So what we have here, while it resembles a bus, has quite a few issues that sort of stand out, not least being things like the doors, the wheels, the general proportions. I'd probably have said at the time it was a style I was going for, but maybe it was because, one, I didn't know what I was doing, and two, I probably thought I'd reached the peak of what I could do in Blender at the time. So just an example of inefficiencies or bad modeling or whatever. This thing here, which is like a sign at the back of the bus, is unnecessarily complex for what I was going for. Given this is a low poly model, I really don't know what I was thinking. Maybe I thought I could do everything from one cube with just doing loop cuts. That is, slicing the model like a cake in sort of parallel lines like this, and then using that to then colour the faces with the colours here. Now I look at it, I don't understand why I was doing what I was doing. If I just show you. So that was by doing like a inset to then make it the right size. Or is it? Yeah. But I don't really understand the logic of doing that, because I'm adding a ton of geometry and basically you can do the same thing with the single face. So like so, you don't even need to do all the stuff with insetting faces and whatever else and colouring things. They could literally just have one quad floating above the surface, and that will do. So that's kind of, again, I'd kind of thought this was a style, I guess. I'm not really sure. So yeah, it's definitely not a chef's kiss in terms of modelling. Anyway, moving on. When you open Blender for the first time, it's tradition to delete the default cube that comes with your opening scene. Probably the reason why everything I build is cursed is because I don't delete it and instead model from this first cube. So using the original bus for scale, really roughly, because this time I'll be using reference for my bus. So if you hadn't guessed from the thumbnail, I'm going to be modelling a Leyland Olympian from 2002. Full credit to Ian Smith for the amazing page here with all the blueprints for the buses, photography, everything. I think this was the one I used. While it looks like I'm just making the same model again, I promise it does get more detailed as we go along. My plan this time, because I know how many windows I want to use, was to subdivide the model into the number of windows plus their pillars, as it were, to then model where the windows were. But thinking about it now, I could probably have done the same thing as I demonstrated before and had all the windows just simply be floating objects. It's always a trade-off, really, because if you want to include an interior and actually make windows you could see through, then you probably want to actually model them in. But in this case, because I'm not modelling an interior, I could have actually kept it a lot simpler. Now, with a fairly complete bus shape, adding the wheels, I noticed that the proportions just didn't look quite right. A bit like those drawings you get at the seaside, which are done in this sort of airbrush style of the caricature cars, you know, where the wheels are really kind of slanted with sort of high negative camber, and so I made it more like the actual original proportions. So I did take some artistic license here with the wing mirrors, because I wanted them to read a bit better. So they are larger than they probably should be, just so they stand out on the model a bit more. So also, ironically, as I had been talking about the sign thing on the front being too many polygons, I did exactly as I did before by making polygons and then insetting it. So I guess nothing learned there. Now the wheels, again, so yeah, this is the point when I realised it looks really dopey. Hopefully this is the point where I actually start scaling the bus, or maybe I just continue on making the wheel arches. I don't know, let's see. Yes, I'm just making the wheel arches. Okay, so hopefully by now I should realise it looks pretty gimpy and stretch it out a bit. At last, we're going to get some regular bus proportions. Oh yes, so we do get rid of the silly bevel and stuff and keep things simple, because that's the way it should be. Probably one of the most challenging things if you're trying to keep polygons low is trying to introduce rounded edges or bevels. The trick is to try and eyeball it as best you can and hope people don't look too close. So at this point the bus is still mirrored, and looking back at the reference and just being aware of buses in real life, typically the doors will only be on one side and that door will face the outside of the street. Rather than, again, trying to do what I did with the original bus and try and join up all the geometry in one super solid watertight mesh, taken a few liberties and then just made some, again, floating geometry to suggest a door without actually having to model it into the actual thing. But this time just modelling it and floating it above the surface like a decal instead. So at this stage it's pretty much complete. Most things on the bus at this point have been decals, as in geometry, really very simple geometry of quads floating above the surface to then suggest something like a headlight or a number plate or whatever. With the windscreen wipers I've tried to make it a bit more interesting so they have some actual physical thickness to them. With everything pretty much done, the last thing to add is the old classic round rule. That includes both the underground, the overground, the buses, the trams, the river, the cycles, the airline, which is a cable car, and finally the new Elizabeth line, which is basically like a normal train. Of all the stuff I modelled for this bus, I found this one was the most fun to make, I think. Finally, I decided to use the proper aerial roof markings, which in the UK are on all vehicles, emergency services, public transport, so on, so they can be easily identified from the air. This is telling you from here this is Arriva London, and then this is a Volvo bus. So this is a Leyland, and that is saying it's a Volvo, but never mind. This is the finished article. It's fairly basic still. What's that? 3,000 triangles versus the old one, which had 2,000 triangles but a lot less detail. So it's still not perfect. I mean, I think if I'd have spent more time on it, probably could have done more in terms of the details and stuff. It does look still a lot like something that could have been achieved with simply using a texture rather than trying to do the whole thing of colouring in polygons. But anyway, so that's it. That's the revised bus. I will get back to actually doing some animation and stuff next time, and hopefully finishing something this year. I guess if you like this very specific content about buses or cat animations, then like and subscribe for more.